well, I guess you would call it poetry.
This is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek, and we've covered the struggle in Brazil with the rise of fascism and fascist movement in Bolsonaro, and the recent election with Lula of the Workers' Party. And joining us is Fabio Bosco, who is a transit worker. He's also a member of Conlutas and has been involved in the struggle in Brazil for a working class, independent working class movement and the political development of the working class in Brazil. So welcome to Workweek, Fabio.
Thanks, Steve, for having me.
So Fabio, in our last discussion, we talked about the danger of the rise of fascism in Brazil and the recent elections. Maybe you can do an overview of what happened in the recent election, and also the fact that Bolsonaro is still refusing to accept Lula victory, and with the danger of still an attempted coup in Brazil. So maybe you can talk about what happened during the election and the results of the election.
Look, Steve, the election was positive for the working class in the sense that it delivered a defeat on Bolsonaro and the far right in general. But it's important to see that Bolsonaro managed to put around him many different sectors, you see, and all these sectors, I mean, the police, the military, ultra-conservative Christians, militias, right-wing militias. He put all these people around him. So despite of the fact that he lost the election, they are still active. To give an example, a couple of hours ago, the news showed that there are 300 points of blockages in the highways, the federal highways in Brazil. These guys are connected to Bolsonaro, and they are sponsored by sectors of the agribusiness, you see. They are not truck drivers themselves. They are truck drivers hired by this agribusiness bourgeoisie who are uncomfortable with the result of the national elections. So this shows to us that the far right lost elections, but they will remain, you see. And what we see, that the state institutions and the capitalists in general, they don't want to finish with the far right. So it will be necessary for the working class to organize independently in order to fight back these forces. To give an example, these blockages in the highways, in the federal highways in Brazil, they are protected by the federal police who is responsible for highways, you see? So despite of the fact the Supreme Court ordered them to open the highways, the top officials of the federal police responsible for highways, in fact, refused to carry out the orders. So it shows that Bolsonaro has important links inside the police forces. That's what it shows to us. So I think that the far right, they suffered a defeat, but they are still alive and active, and it will be necessary for the working class to self-organize to fight back then.
And as we know, that most people should know, there was a coup in Brazil, a military coup, which the United States and the AFL-CIO, AIFLD, American Institute for Free Labor Development, was involved in that coup. There was a coup, we're coming on to the anniversary of the Chilean coup, in which also there were blockades of truck drivers financed by the United States, CIA, supported by the AFL-CIO. This tactic of organizing a coup and an overthrow of the government seems to, in Latin America, stem from the United States intervention in Brazil. What are the parallels to that coup, the last coup in Brazil, and the dangers of another coup with Bolsonaro refusing to accept defeat by Lula?
I think, Steve, that there are some parallels that we can draw from the 1964 coup d'etat that was funded, sponsored by the US. But now what happened? The US imperialism, they are not supporting Bolsonaro. There is a difference. Look, what happened in Brazil, the majority of the capitalists the Brazilian capitalists and also the international powers, all of them are interested at this moment in allowing Lula to become the new president. And why? Look, Lula has an international image as a kind of left-wing or trade union leader, but these facts belong to the past, you see. Currently, Lula is building a national unity government, you see, with every political force he can bring together with him. That means primarily the bourgeois parties, you see. So he will build a government in alliance with the capitalists to protect the capitalists' interests and also the international capitalist interests, you see, not only the national ones, but the international ones. So at this moment, you see, President Biden called Lula yesterday and to congratulate him and say that we must collaborate in protecting the Amazon, in fighting back hunger, and also protecting the borders of the United States against immigration. That's what he said. So what's happening? Lula is becoming part of the international capitalist interests, you see? So at this moment, that's the politics of imperialism. On the other side, this tactic of blocking roads, highways, and using truck drivers to do that, and I must tell you, reinforce this idea. There are 2 million truck drivers in Brazil, but the ones that are blocking, maybe they are 2,000, you see? So it's a small minority that are funded by the agribusiness, sectors that are connected to Bolsonaro. So it's not the truck drivers, it's a sector of truck drivers, small sectors funded by these guys. Yes, this is something traditional in Latin America because look, when you block the highways, look, they blocked the international airport of Sao Paulo this morning. 25 flights were canceled. So it's a big problem for the functioning of society and for the capitalists as well, you see. So there are parallels that we can see clearly, but what we see that in Brazil, the generals, the army are very much influenced by the politics that comes from Washington. So if Biden says Lula must rule, the army in general will say yes. But if Biden says, look, Lula is not the best one to do the job, then certainly it would be possible to organize the top generals to do some kind of action to prevent that, if they could not do it through democratic means, I mean, you see, through the Supreme Court or Parliament or elections, I don't know. So I think these parallels we can see, and it's very important for us to be aware of that, because look, today Washington is supporting Lula, but and putting pressure for this international agenda and to have this government of national unity. But just in case the situation in Brazil, which is very bad, you see, Steve, the unemployment is still high. The jobs that were generated in the last period is low quality jobs. 33 million Brazilians do not have enough food. So the situation is very bad. And there might be some kind of uprising. In this case, if Lula cannot control that, certainly Washington and the Brazilian capitalists will resort for Bolsonaro. You see? That's the idea.
And the Bannon and the Trump supporters in the United States are calling on Bolsonaro to reject the election and to basically try to stay in power. And a relationship between the US fascist right-wing forces and Brazilian forces, how deep is it in Brazil?
It's very deep. They are deeply connected. In reality, there is an international alliance of the far right, you see, and Trump and Bannon, they are in the center of it. And Bolsonaro is totally connected to them. But the problem that Bolsonaro has today is that, look, he managed to build a strong basis, you see, but among these people, there are people that believe that he must accept the result, including people that are very close to him that were elected to become governor of Sao Paulo, for instance, or to the Senate. They want the elections to be respected. They don't want to put into question the legitimacy of the elections. So you have this wing, which is powerful. And you have another wing, which is smaller, but they are the most radicalized far-right members of his group, you see. These guys want a military coup d'etat. They are blocking the streets saying, they put banners saying, intervention of the army now, you see. So this sector, so Bolsonaro, what happened to him? He's hiding in the presidential palace. He has not said anything up to now. At the same time, he is telling these guys to carry out these blockades. He's telling the federal police that's responsible for the highways to not interfere, but in some places they are even helping them. But if he go into the public, because of the whole pressure that is in Brazil now, he will be obliged in some way to recognize the result of the election. That's why he's hidden and he's acting. He's active doing his politics. That's what I see. All political analysts here, the liberal ones including, they believe that there is no space at this moment for a kind of coup d'etat. And that's why, look, the Supreme Court very quickly to take a decision that the federal police must open the highways, and they are putting a fine of 100,000 reais, that is more or less $20,000 per hour on the main official of the federal police if he don't open you see, and the Supreme Court voted that either he opened the highways or he will put in jail. So the Supreme Court is part of this institutional bourgeois state. So the Supreme Court is connected with the capitalist interests at this moment, which is Lula must rule, okay? Bolsonaro will remain, but they cannot block the roads. Business needs to go on, you see? You cannot stop the economy. So that's the appreciation I had at this moment.
And this need for unity that Lula is talking about, unity of the capitalists and the working class, was that the program of CUT, the Workers' Party, when he first ran? What's the difference between their program then and today, the program of Lula?
Look, the program is similar, but the political conditions when he was elected 20 years ago, yes, they were different. Because look, in his first term, the economy was very positive because Brazil became the main exporter of some commodities. You see, coffee, sugar, orange juice, soybean, iron ore. So the Brazilian economy was positive at that moment, which allowed Lula to have at the same time the banking system, the big capitalists making a lot of money, and to provide what we call here family allowance, which is a support for the very poor. You see, the support would be something like $50 per month to the very, very poor. So in his administration, he tried to connect these interests. You see, the big business will make a lot of money, and the very poor will have some money. The working class that has labor rights, they were put under attack. You see, during his first administration. And the opposition to Lula was the liberal bourgeois parties that were opposition, but they voted the main reforms that Lula proposed. Now we have a different scenario. You see, the economic conditions are very different because the international economy is not going well. And the Brazilian economy, the predictions that next year it will grow only 0.5%. So you have less space to provide, you see, this support for the very poor, and probably you have to carry out liberal reforms. And the opposition will be the far right. The far right has 20% of the parliament. So they will be the opposition. So it's an opposition that's more difficult to deal with. So I think that the program of Lula is more or less the same. So it's to, as he says, is to rule for everyone, the rich, the poor, you see, that's what he says. So it's more or less the same. But the conditions that of his third term are different, are more challenging for him. And I have to tell you, Steve, that also for the working class, it will be a big challenge, you see, because look, the working class at the same time will have to fight back the far right, and will have to fight back the liberal policies coming from this Lula-led national unit government. So it's two enemies that sometimes are in conflict. And so it makes things much more difficult. So I think that we'll have challenging times for everyone, for Lula to rule with the capitalists, to the far right to keep all the influence they have, and for the working class to keep their rights and improve their living conditions.
Now, the unions, CUT Federation, the largest trade unions in Brazil, are supporting Lula and have been actively supporting them. Their ideology is social democracy. They're social democratic, and the social democratic leadership around the world, social democratic parties, are greeting them. What is the reality for social democracy in Brazil? Because you say that the conditions are going to go down, and there may be a world depression as a result of high interest rates in the United States. Weaker countries like Argentina, Turkey could go bankrupt because they have to pay back the loans that they have in dollars, the overvalued dollar. What is the implications for Brazil with the major decline in the economy and continued attacks and intensification attacks by capitalists, big capital, on the working class in Brazil?
I think, Steve, that when we talk about social democracy, we remember the social democracy of 100 years ago, which were more militant or more connected to some kind of nationalization program or something like this. But today, what I can tell you is that the Workers' Party and the CUT, they don't support this kind of policies, you see. The CUT may talk about something like this, but the Workers' Party, definitely not. Nationalizations are not in their agenda. What's in their agenda is support for the very, very, very poor, to make the minimum wages, which are very low in Brazil, you see, to be a little bit, to follow inflation with something more. So it's a very limited kind of social democracy, you see. But even these limited concessions that the working class might get are not easy to carry out, because look, when Lula is in power with this national unit government, he must provide the public funds for all these capitalist groups, you see, to benefit big capitalist groups, and also the particular interests of members in parliament, of ministers. So it's a difficult combination. In his previous government, Lula did some things that are very interesting. For instance, he used public funding to create or to help some Brazilian big business. That was the case of the building industry. That was the case of the meat industry. So he put a lot of public money in, for these guys, you see, and they become some of the largest companies, corporations across the world, you see, helped by this public money. I think he wants to do the same, but the conditions to do something like this, which some capitalists would appreciate a lot, they are not posed. It will be much more difficult. And at the same time, the poor, look, 33 million people do not have enough food. Brazil has the food, you see? The problem is that the price of food is not affordable for these people. What Lula will do, you see? He does not want to challenge the market policies, you see? And so many of these things are commodities, so are regulated by international prices, like coffee, for instance, you see? Like meat, Brazil has a huge, there is 1 cow per Brazilian, you see? But there is the price of meat is inaccessible for the majority of the people. Lula does not want to challenge the market rules, let's say. So it will be difficult for him to prevent some kinds of social explosions, you see, protests. I think that the scenario you're going to have in Brazil is a scenario of crisis, you see, not only on the economy or the political regime, but also a social crisis where might emerge important struggles that might bring change. These ones might bring change.
And alongside the attack in the United States of fascist right-wingers, attempted assassination of Pelosi, the attack on her husband, and also more and more fascist attacks, turning point, there are organizations now around the United States that are organizing confrontations, attacking students, attacking leftists, and the danger of assassinations with guns, large number of guns around by rightists of leftists, of bourgeois politicians even. In the election, there were some Lula supporters, Worker Party supporters who were murdered in the streets. Is that going to grow in Brazil?
Unfortunately, I think we will have this reality. These Bolsonarist groups, they will carry on attacks and actions that might include not only beating, but also killing of activists or the poor. Look, one day before the national elections, one member of parliament, a far-right woman, she was with her security guards, and she was making campaign in the streets. And then one guy, one black man, come to her and said, look, your days are gone. Tomorrow you're going to lose the elections, and start to tell her, Lula will win, Lula will win. Steve, she took a gun and start to persecute this black man through the street, you see? And then finally, she cornered him with her security guards as well, and told him, look, go to the floor or I will shoot you. So one day before elections, and look, the day before, you cannot carry weapons. Even the ones who have the license to carry weapons, they cannot one day before the elections. And what happened to her? Nothing. The police went there, required her to give the weapons to the police, and she's free. She has more weapons, so when she thinks it's necessary, she'll do the same. So in this case, they did not kill, but there was another event that was something horrible, which is here in São Paulo as well, in a very poor neighborhood. The candidate, Bolsonaro candidate for governor of São Paulo, who won? He was with his security guards, and one of them killed a black man for no reason. Nothing was happening, and he shot him. And the police is making a cover-up. not to bring to bring him to the courts or something like this. Everyone is free. So unfortunately, I think that these kinds of attack by far-right groups will increase in Brazil. And that's why we in CSP Conlutas, we are supporting the idea that we must develop self-defense, you see, in the labor unions, in the poor communities. Because if we have self-defense, all these actions will be much more difficult, you see. And there are examples, look, Steve, this today, when these groups of Bolsonaro people are blocking the roads, there was 2 places where there was a reaction by the ordinary people. One of them was a poor community. They come to the highway and told the Bolsonaro people to go away, and they will start a fight. And these Bolsonaro people, they had to go away, and they opened the highway. In another example, it was in Rio de Janeiro, the workers of metal workers were going to the plant to work, and some of them were leaving the plant, and there was a blockage. And then they left the buses and went there and take out this Bolsonaro group that was blocking the road, and they opened the road. So this, how can I say, this feeling for self-defense, I think it will increase because the police is not protecting the people, you see. So I feel that naturally the poor communities and the working class will try to build these self-defense tactics. But the best thing would be to have a clear orientation by the labor movement, you see, and the left-wing forces and community leaders towards building this organization for self-defense by any means necessary.
And Conlutas is a united front federation. Why don't you talk about it? Because in the United States, there is no independent trade union federation alongside the AFL-CIO and the main trade unions. How is the perspective and organization of Conlutas organized, and this idea of a united front against fascism, against the right wing in the working class, seems that it may grow bigger because of the continued growth of Bolsonaro forces and fascist forces in Brazil?
Look, Steve, that's a debate that we have been doing the last, I can tell you, in the last 1 year, we have been holding meetings, the national coordination of CSP Conlutas, we have 2 big debates on that. And now we are trying to go to the rank and file, you see. It's not something that's easy. It's not easy, but the reality may impose that for the working class to self-defense, you see. So the discussions we are having in the leadership of the unions are very interesting, So I think this will happen in a way or the other. It's important to keep in mind that CSP Conlutas is a minority inside the labor movement. You see, the largest organizations, the CUT and others, they don't have this politics. You see, even, for instance, today, the labor movement should go to the highways and take these Bolsonaro people away, you see. That's what should be done, because the police was together with these Bolsonaro people. But the major labor federations, they are not in favor of anything that goes out the institutional way, you see. But some sectors, like these 2 examples I gave to you, no one was leading that. It happened. You see, this poor community and these metal workers that opened the highway, they did it by themselves. So we, CSP Conlutas, we have a conscious plan to develop it. And let's see how much we manage to do it. Let's talk maybe next year, we bring this issue once again, and I tell you which were the results, the positive and negative results of this policy.
And in the United States, leading up to the election, there was a concern about an insurrection, a coup, and the Vermont AFL-CIO, David Van Dusen, passed a resolution, despite the opposition of the AFL-CIO, Trump, that there be a general strike against an attempted coup and insurrection in the United States, that the working class organize a general strike to stop a coup and insurrection. And the AFL-CIO leadership said, we have to rely on the Democrats, we have to rely on the courts, on the capitalist system to protect us. You think that debate is similar to what is going on in Brazil about how workers are going to protect themselves? I mean, because the threat of another coup and insurrection is very much on the table in the United States.
Yes, 100%. It's exactly the same debate. You see, Steve, and look, the ordinary workers, they would love if the institutions do their work, you see? If the state could provide good jobs, if the state could provide better wages, if the state could stop and finish with the far right. But the problem is that the state is not doing that, was not doing that, and will not do that. I don't see sincerely in Lula or the capitalists any willingness to smash the far right, and not only smash, even to punish. You see, for instance, Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro has a list of wrongdoing, you see, that are completely illegal. But I don't feel that the state, you see, the public prosecutor, you see, the state institutions will do anything to punish him. I don't see. I feel that either the working class independently organize itself and do it, or the state, I think we cannot trust the state to carry out this necessity, you see. I think justice will come through other means. So the same debate you reported about the how to fight back the far right is the same debate we have here in Brazil.
And in the United States, there is no mass working class political alternative. There is no workers' party. It's just the Democrats and Republicans. What is the situation politically in Brazil? Is there a working class political alternative, or do workers think that the CUT and the Workers' Party of Lula is the Workers' Party?
Look, they are small revolutionary socialist organizations that are not so small as they are in the US, but still they are not, they don't have mass influence, you see. And this space of the left wing today is largely occupied by the Workers' Party and parties that are very much associated to them, like the Communist Party of Brazil or PSOL, which is the part for socialism and freedom. So they are today very much connected to the Workers' Party. So these political organizations, they have a hegemony on the left, let's say, and also among the working class. But every time they start to rule, it opens the way for a kind of divorce. You see, Steve, because when you talk about labor rights, you talk about rights for the poor, you talk about all of this, about injustice, but then Lula became the president of Brazil. And what will he do? People expect him to carry out some of these ideas that they develop every day, but I don't think that he will. I don't think he will deliver any of these issues. So there is a kind of divorce between the working class and these major left-wing parties. And there is the space that we must, the revolutionary left-wing must work to occupy, you see. And it's not easy, because last time the one that benefit from this was Bolsonaro, you see. The many people in the working class, they voted for Bolsonaro, not because they agree with military coup or ultra-conservative ideas. They don't agree with that, but they want to punish the Workers' Party, you see. It's a kind of the lesser evil politics, you see. And in this last election, 2 days ago, the same thing happened. The vote for Lula and the vote for Bolsonaro, half of them, at least half of them, are not for their political perspectives, but are votes that are against the other. You see, for instance, Bolsonaro got 58 million votes. Half of it are people that hate the Workers' Party. They don't agree with Bolsonaro, but they vote against the Workers' Party. And 60 million votes for Lula, half of them, they don't agree with Lula political perspective, but they hate Bolsonaro. I myself, I voted for Lula 2 days ago, but I don't agree with his political perspective. You see, in reality, we are preparing to be a left-wing opposition to him. You see, so what I mean with this is that these issues are not simple, but we need to have a clear perspective. With a clear perspective, we can dispute the working class when the divorce with the reformists happen.
And there is also rising class struggle in the rest of Latin America globally, but in Argentina, there's a struggle in the working class against the government and the rise of fascism there. The United States now is talking about invading Haiti. I don't know if there's still Brazilian troops in Haiti. And there's a continuing right-wing movement to overthrow, which, of course, if Trump came back to power in the United States, he would intervene directly in his forces banning for right-wing dictatorships all over Latin America and internationally. How do you see the role internationally of uniting the working class and fighting for the independence, politically, the working class, organization of the working class internationally?
Look, Steve, let me tell you something. I followed a lot the revolution that started in Chile in 2019. It was a powerful revolution, you see. Many people in the streets, they wanted to put down the government and the regime altogether. But you see the role of social democracy, you see. The main left-wing parties, at a certain point, they make an agreement, which is called the peace agreement, to call elections for a constitutional Congress, you see. This agreement was meant to take people out of the streets, you see. It was meant to stop the revolution. It's true that the Constitutional Congress was an achievement, you see, but this achievement was also a danger, and the danger was confirmed. The constitutional process, it weakened the mobilizations in the street, you see, and the Boric was elected president, so the left wing was elected. Since in power, he delivered many policies against the working class. He declared emergency in the areas of the native Chileans, Mapuches. You see, that's a shame. This was the politics of the Pinochet, you see. So it starts a disillusionment with the left wing, and the constituent did not deliver something that was clearly would improve the life of the people, you see. There was some achievements in the draft of the Constitution, like abortion rights, the recognition of the oppressed nationalities. That's true. But for instance, the nationalization of the mining industry, that was a necessity to improve the living conditions of the people. It was not there. And so there was a disillusionment that led to the people to reject the new constitution. And at the same time, people are not in the streets. So that peace agreement was the key to take out, to demobilize the working people and take them away from the streets. So what I think that we really need a kind of revolutionary left wing to lead these struggles, you see. because the situation is open for strikes, for mobilizations. You see, we in Brazil, for instance, we inspire ourselves from struggles that happen in the US, like this struggle for abortion rights, against the decision of the Supreme Court, the strikes that happened 1 year ago in October, the struggle against police brutality that eventually were instrumental to defeat Trump. So we see that the struggles are there, you see, are everywhere. But the problem is that outside a political perspective that fights for workers' power, everything we lose, you see. We lose, there is deception among the working people, and then the big capitalists, they take the rule and impose their politics. So I think that in Latin America, we have this problem. You mentioned in Argentina, it's a kind of progressive government, but it's a progressive government that is connected with the IMF politics. So this means IMF means hunger. You see, there is no way, you cannot escape from that. And so all this new administration, progressive administration, all of them are capitalists. You see, in Peru and Colombia, and even Venezuela, Nicaragua, or Cuba, okay, they have a kind of left-wing or progressive speech, but the fact is that the capitalists are ruling through them. And so for the working class, we need to overcome these leaderships. That's my perspective.
And one of the major issues, of course, is privatization. And when I was in Brazil, there was a big struggle at that time against the privatization of the oil industry. Was nationalized. That was under the Lula government. In the United States, the Democrats are privatizing healthcare, Medicare. They're taking away privatizing education. The Democrats are involved in privatization of education with charters. You see an international struggle against privatization of public services as critical for the working class globally.
Look, I myself, I work in the Sao Paulo subway. You see, the government is privatizing lines of the subway, but still half of it is public. You see, there are other important companies which are public owned, and our politics is to defend them. And an international campaign, of course, is instrumental for this goal. And you see, Steve, I believe that when we talk about the challenges we have in Brazil, we see that on the one side, it's necessary to independently self-organize the working class. And on the other side, we must put our efforts in building international solidarity, you see, because these two together are very powerful. Isolated, the Brazilian working class will have much more difficulties to overcome all the challenges we have ahead. But international solidarity may help all these struggles to win. So when you suggest an international campaign to defend, to oppose the privatizations, I think it's a necessity for the working class across the world.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much for joining us. We've been talking with Fabio Bosco about the ongoing struggle in Brazil, the results of the election, Lula, and the continuing danger of a fascist coup with Bolsonaro and right-wing forces who are blocking the highways right now to protest the election. So thanks for joining us on Work Week. And we will obviously continue to follow this struggle because it's not just something in Brazil. The same struggle is really happening in the United States. So thanks for joining us, Fabio.
Okay, thank you, Steve.